So let's get going with the lesson, and we're going to start working on the very basics or the foundation of the photo sharing application we were talking about before. So we're going to start out by writing ourselves a very, very simple JSON server. So we'll call it simple.json.js. Now, this time we're going to use a module that we haven't seen before called HTTP, and it will help us do a lot of the basic HTTP server functionality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a function called handle incoming request, and this is going to take a request object with the incoming information and a response object that will handle sort of the outgoing information. I'm going to do a console.log, and I'm going to say incoming request. And on the request object there is a method like get post or something like that. And then there is also the URL, what they requested. So I'll console log that. Now, I'm going to, my very simple server here, I'm going to write out some HTTP headers on the response object. I'm going to write out 200. And I'm also going to add a custom header here because I want to say contents type application JSON, because we're writing a JSON server here, so I want to mark all of the outgoing content as of being that type. And then finally, I'm going to say res.end, and any request we process must always call the end function on the response object to send to sort of send down the final data and close out the response. So I'm going to do the res.end, and I'm going to stringify an object which says error null, and then I'm also going to pretty print it with a new line. So I really want to be sending down JSON all the time of my response, but the response object doesn't really understand objects or something. It just always wants strings, so I can use this cool method JSON stringify to take any JSON object and convert it to a string, and then I'll throw here the new line on it at the end. So now I'm going to say is var server equals http.createServer, and all requests coming into that server will be sent to the handle incoming request function, and then I'm going to tell my server to listen on port 8080. And if I've typed that in correctly, I should be able to say node simple JSON. Now I'm going to go here to another window, and I'm going to use the curl command, which I don't know if you've seen before. Most Macintosh computers come with curl, and most Unix machines, like if you're on Linux, you can usually do like apt-get install curl or something to get the curl command line utility. And for Windows users, you can usually Google search how to find like a curl binaries for Windows, and you can totally get those, and you can do that. You can curl no problems on Windows. I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to say curl -i because I want to get the headers. I'm going to send the get method, and then I'm going to localhost 8080 because if you remember, that's the port we're listening on instead of port 80. So, all right. You'll see the server prints it out on console. Hey, I got an incoming a get request for the URL /. And my client got the JSON response from the server. You'll also see that because we specified the -i, curl printed out the response headers, and you'll see that 200 is the OK code, and you'll see that that content type application JSON that we specified was also sent down to us. Now, if you're running on Windows and you're a little worried about how this is all going to translate to your computer, fear not. I actually have a Windows machine set up here and ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the source code for this program, and I'm going to come over here to our Windows machine, and then I am going to fire up Notepad, and I'm going to create a simple JSON.js. We'll paste the code there. It's the same code we had before. And now I'm just going to run that, and now I have Node listening for requests here. I'll fire up another command window there, and on my machine I've already gone ahead and installed the curl program that we've been using on the other platforms. At the very end of these live lessons there is another small, quick little special lesson that'll help Windows users out with a couple of common problems. One is curl, and then another one is related to the localhost thing that we've been using a lot. So I should be able to say curl-i-xget, and then I'll just say I want port 8080 on localhost. And you'll see we get the same output, the application JSON, the 200 OK, and the JSON data. So that's running it on Windows. It really should be exactly the same. So feel free to follow along on Windows, even as I'm doing this on the Mac or on Linux or wherever we're going with things. It'll work just fine. So I want to very quickly talk about the JSON that we're going to be returning from our JSON server. We're basically going to be working with one of two types. If we have an error, we're going to specify a code, and we'll say like missing data, and then we'll give you a message. And that message will be you need to provide an email address or something. So the response will be either that, or if the response is good, then what we'll do is we'll say error is null, and then we'll have a data parameter. And then for the data parameter, we can have either an object or a value or whatever the particular API is supposed to return. So for example, we might say the user is, name, Mark, email address, mark1@example.org or something. So the response will always be in one of these two formats. It'll be an error with a message or a null error with data, and then with the actual, expected data within that, within the contents of that data. Okay, so for our photo album application, what we're going to do is in the beginning, we're going to actually just use the file system as our storage medium. We're not going to use a database or anything because we've already seen some of the file system APIs, and I want to sort of focus on the mechanics of working with Node and not bog ourselves down right yet on working with databases. So what I've done here, you can just kill any Node server by just hitting Control-C. You're not doing any damage or anything like that. You'll see here I've created a folder called Albums. And in that, I've created 3 subfolders here. I've created Australia 2012, Italy 2012, and Japan 2010. And then in each of these, I've created a bunch of image files. And you'll see they're all 0 bytes right now because we don't actually care if they're actual valid images. I'm just using placeholders here in the file system. So to list the albums in our system, we're just going to tell our JSON server to go to the albums folder here and then list the contents of that folder like that. Okay, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to modify my server here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to write a function called load album list, and it is going to just take a callback. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to use the file system functions again. So I need to require fs. And then I'm going to say fs.readDir, and then I just want to load my subfolder albums. And then it's going to get an error and a file list response function like that. Now, once I've got those, I'm actually just going to call the callback directly with the list of files like that. Okay. Now, my handle incoming request function, all I'm going to do is I'm going to first call the load album list. And I'm going to say I want going to give it the function with errors and then the albums like that. And then if errors are not null, oopsie, let's make sure that I actually do that. Okay, if the error is not null, then I'm going to print out some unhappy information. So I'm going to say response 503, which we'll talk about later on in this lesson, the server code. And then I'm going to say error, file, error, and then for message, I'm going to say error.message because the error objects always have a message. So if there's a failure, I'm going to actually send down some headers and some contents to say that there was the failure. There we go. Otherwise, if it succeeded, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to go back to the positive response, and I'm going to say 200, and I'm actually going to say there's no error. And then again, I said we'll always have a data parameter, or a data field, and the data in this case will be albums, and it will just be the list of the albums like this, which is this parameter passed to our callback. And that's our JSON. We'll add the pretty printing new line like that, and that should be our updated server that can now list albums in our folder. Let's see if we type that in correctly. So simple JSON, and then now, hey, there you go. So you'll see we got our response object. There's no error, and then for the data, we have an object which has albums and then an array with the 3 albums in it, like that. Here you'll see the incoming request is get and slash, and we didn't really have to write that much code to sort of get the beginnings of our photo sharing application. So that's the basics of writing a very, very simple JSON server, and in the next part we'll start to add some new functionality to it.